Okay, good morning. Everyone can hear me? I'm Linda Eling Lee. I am the founding director and head of the MSCI Sustainability Institute. It is my pleasure this morning to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Sabine Mauderer. So I met Sabine actually at the G20 conference in Venice. This was still during the pandemic, and I think it was very much the first big gathering that many people had during the pandemic, so it was particularly memorable. But when I met Sabine, I just thought she was so thoughtful about how to actually incorporate climate risk into financial regulations and oversight that I had in the back of my mind that I must bring her here to New York Climate Week for this audience, because I think that of all the different events that we do at MSCI, this particular audience tends to be the most sophisticated and thoughtful when it comes to systemic risks like climate change and how to actually incorporate that into investment decisions. So I'm very happy today to be connecting the two. So let me introduce Dr. Sabine Mauderer. She has been a member of the executive board of the Deutsche Bundesbank since September 2018. She is responsible for the Directorate's Human Resource Procurement and Markets, which includes the implementation of monetary policy. And in that capacity, she is currently the vice chair of the Central Banks and Supervisors Network for Greening the Financial System, which is a lot of words, but everybody knows this as NGFS. Okay, so she is the vice chair of the NGFS. Dr. Mauderer will actually become chair of the NGFS at the beginning of 2024, which we're very excited for. So she previously held senior positions at KfW Banking Group, at the Federal Ministry of Finance, and at the German Embassy in Washington. We're really honored to have her here today to address us. The title of her talk is Looking at the Opportunities on the Way to a Sustainable Economy. So she will give an address, and then I look forward to sitting down with her for a short Q&A session afterwards. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. And dear Linda, thank you for your very kind introduction. I'm really delighted to be here with you on this gorgeous late summer day. And let me just begin with a cliche. Markets don't like uncertainty. And why? Because dealing with uncertainty tends to be stressful and complex. Unfortunately, when it comes to climate change, there is a lot of uncertainty, many unknowns. Climate change itself, however, is unfortunately a certainty. Just look outside of the window for proof. Well, it's Climate Week this week. And we all have packed agendas, but hopefully we will be able to catch some sunshine later. We are lucky indeed. But flashback to early June. You would have urged me to stay indoors. Wildfires up in Canada brought toxic smoke to New York City and turned the skies orange. There is no denying that climate change is on our doorsteps. Let me give you some figures. Assuming current policy, physical risk such as losses due to droughts or rising sea levels could lead to an almost 8% loss of global GDP by 2050. To put this staggering figure into perspective, the global financial crisis in 2008 led to a GDP loss around 4%. So this shows you how big this impact is. Ladies and gentlemen, the facts are on the table. Climate change will have consequences for all of us. That much is certain. Having said that, when it comes to understanding how climate change will affect us, the picture is less clear-cut. This lack of understanding is incredibly worrying. It may contribute to the lack of urgency that current climate policies reflect all too often. And this underlines the importance of reducing uncertainty. And now let's shed a light on climate risk, because that's where central banks come into play. Dealing with financial risk is our bread and butter business. This ample expertise can help to strengthen the understanding of climate-related risk. And the Network for Greening the Financial System, as Linda rightly pointed out, it's better to call it just NGFS, it's easier, who I'm the incoming chair, is pooling the experience of almost now 130 central banks globally, including a lot of supervisors from all over the world. And one of our flagship products are climate scenarios. They help assess how different pathways for emissions and climate policies might affect the economy and, of course, also the financial system. Just to give you an example, in the US, heat stress could reduce labor productivity by almost 5% points by 2050. And heat stress is just one of many other factors. Therefore, it is important to design a holistic model for climate scenarios. Scenarios explore different plausible futures and hence contribute to reducing the uncertainty. Supervisors use them for their climate stress test. Financial institutions can use them for their in-house risk management. Including for measuring climate value at risk. To improve the usability of the scenarios, the NGFS is continuously updating and fine-tuning our scenarios. And the next update is due later this year. Our aim now is to make it much more granular across sectors, but also across regions, because what we find out is that there are big and huge differences among sectors and also regions. Scenarios offer us a glimpse of what the future might look like. With the current climate policies in the world in 2050 does not look too great, to say the least. That is 27 years from now on. A bit less than that, 26 years ago, in 1997, the movie Titanic hit the theaters. And you all know the fate of the ship that was hailed as being unsinkable, that tried to steer away from the iceberg when it was already too late. The window to act on climate change is also closing, but there is still some time to turn the ship. Shifting the economy towards a net zero future calls for all hands on deck. So companies must embark on a journey of adjusting their business models. Transition plans can be a powerful tool to guide this way. And at the NGFS, we have recognized the importance of the so-called transition plans. We have started initial work on assessing the use of transition plans, and we will continue to do so. In early summer, we have published the first findings from a stock take among members. We found that while the importance of transition plans was recognized, there's still a lack of a common understanding of some new topics. And let me just briefly highlight 3 findings. So what we found is that 3 things. First, it turned out that we really need to have a common understanding what does actually transitioning, what does transformation actually mean. Second point, we need a clear understanding, or at least a common understanding, of what kind of information and data do we really need from companies, from financial institutions, to understand whether they are transforming or not. And the third point, it turned out to be unclear is who actually will check these transition plans and against which standards. So I think there's a lot to do, and that's the reason why the NGFS will continue to work on these issues. Next step, so we've just done the stock taking, and our next step will be to identify what financial institutions actually need from their clients, from the corporates, kind of data from internet, to really get a clue about the strategic view, whether they are really on a transition plans or rather not. Despite further work to come, let me just share some insights we have already moved towards a common understanding. Transition plans are a roadmap for companies. They translate a corporate vision of a net zero future into tangible actions. By outlining concrete, very precise steps and milestones, and by looking beyond the usual strategy horizon, companies should include transition plans in their broader strategy. And in fact, they should be part of their risk management. Transition plans are not only about risk, but also about opportunities. And I understood that this panel this morning was also about opportunities. Companies can show investors that they are ready for net zero future. And financial institutions can benefit from transition plans too. They can use them to manage their own risk as a financial institution, but also assess if a company is investable. That way, financial institutions can hold corporates to their commitments and enforce market discipline. And the way it will work is, of course, we as supervisors can only ask financial institutions for transition plans, but what does that mean actually? In order to get, as a financial institutions, the data for the transition plans, I have to ask my client, the corporates, to do the same exercise. So that's a way it could work. So with these use and benefits in mind, I very much welcome and highly appreciate the announcement made by Secretary General yesterday. And I was around when she made this statement yesterday, and I was really impressed. In her presentation, Secretary General of the principles of net zero financing investment, she made an important step in the development of transition financing generally, but even more specifically, if you have a look directly at the very first principles of those that were presented yesterday, you will find that Treasury 2 recommends for any voluntary net zero commitment to be credible, it should be accomplished by a net zero transition plan. So here we are. I think it is a very strong commitment and signal. So I couldn't agree more with Secretary Janet Yellen. So let me wrap up, because I think the idea of today is also to be rather interactive. Reducing uncertainty about climate change will help us to embrace the opportunities of the green transition. If we will all meet again in a decade or so, we would realize the green economy is just the economy. This event offers excellent opportunities to discuss possible ways to support this transition, and I hope you will take full advantage of this. Then there can be no healthy economy without a healthy planet. Thank you.